Synopsis: a Minecraft player awakens in Middle-earth, discovering his game's interface has come with him. With a crafting table and a hunger bar, he must navigate the Shire, befriend a curious hobbit, and build a fortress in the wild. Using his unique abilities to cook, craft, and fight, he prepares for the epic adventures ahead, from orc raids to ancient evils, all while trying to survive in a world more dangerous than any server. Chapter 1, First Step. Boom! Across the great cosmos, a streak of light shot through the void, a meteor blazing its way from the formless chaos, plunging headfirst into a world teeming with both life and turmoil. The disturbance didn't go unnoticed. A vast, ancient gaze turned toward it, accompanied by a chorus of harmonies that rose and fell like a celestial symphony. The meteor, as if drawn by an unseen hand, veered off course and merged into the melody. A new note, one never heard before, emerged, dancing at the edge of the great composition. Fresh yet harmonious, it spun and shimmered, adding to the cosmic song. Acceptable. The gaze withdrew. Flash. Achievement unlocked. Step into the central realm. Description: enter the central realm. Hi. Wind rustled through grass and trees. Birds chirped cheerily above. Something warm brushed across his cheeks. Eric blinked against the sunlight stabbing into his newly awakened eyes, forcing him to squint and groan. It took a good moment before his senses adjusted. Slowly, he began to take in his surroundings. And then he saw it, floating text before his eyes, like a subtle whisper across his vision. An achievement. Wait a second, that style looked oddly familiar. Central Realm. Eric stood up, took a deep breath, and was immediately hit by the freshness of the air, clean, with the faint scent of grass and damp soil. Definitely better than the musty little flat he remembered. He was standing beneath a tall oak tree, surrounded in every direction by green fields and rolling hills. One thing was certain, this wasn't anywhere near his apartment. Was he kidnapped? Did he sleepwalk onto a plane? His mind spun. He tried desperately to recall what had happened before all this, but it was all a haze. Blank. The last memory he could latch onto was playing Minecraft. Yes, Minecraft, a classic sandbox game, beloved by all ages. Eric had played it for over a decade, ever since he was a kid. Even after all these years, even when staring at endless pixelated blocks, he'd never grown tired of it. Wait. Something clicked. He stared at the floating text again. It was beginning to fade into transparency, but as he focused, it became sharp once more. That's the Minecraft achievement system. As his jaw dropped in disbelief, another translucent message appeared in the top right corner of his vision. Tutorial quest, open your inventory. Inventory. On instinct, Eric whispered inventory in his mind. A familiar UI popped open. 3 rows of slots, 1 hotbar. And on the left, a character model. His own, with the same stunned expression and goofy posture. There were even 4 armor slots. Closing the inventory, Eric noticed a new overlay now permanently part of his vision. He had a health bar and a hunger bar. The hunger bar was already halfway down, probably from lying unconscious in the grass too long. Did I get ice guyed into Minecraft? Just as he debated whether to go punch a tree and craft a workbench, a voice called out to him. Excuse me, are you all right? Language module loaded. Another notification blinked into place alongside the voice. Eric jumped and spun around, yet saw no one. What the hell? Down here, sir. A hand waved in front of his face. Eric looked down and met the eyes of what could only be described as a tiny man. Are you all right, sir? The little man asked kindly. Eric blinked. He gave the stranger a once-over. He stood only waist-high. His voice was mature, his clothes well-made. A fish hung from his belt. Definitely not a child. One explanation came to mind. Dwarfism. Clearing his throat, Eric composed himself. Hello there. Human, sir, the small fellow said, tilting his head. Are you lost, perhaps? Human, sir. What a way to put it. Still, the presence of another person, however small, was a comfort. At least he wasn't alone in the wild. Yes, actually, I am a bit lost. Could I ask where I am? The little man blinked, then answered, Why, you're in the Shire. Specifically Hobbiton. Eric froze. The Shire. A name surged out of his long-term memory. The Shire, the Lord of the Rings. Oh no. Eric looked down at the fellow before him again. Waist-height big feet, fuzzy toes, slightly pointed ears. A hobbit. So, this was the Middle-earth Central Realm he'd just seen in the achievement text. Eric stood there stunned, unsure whether to panic or dance with joy. Middle-earth, beautiful and storied, full of fascinating people, magical creatures, and epic adventures. In the films, it was practically paradise. But in reality, it was also full of dangers, orcs, Sauron, Nazgul, and every manner of terrifying fate. A peaceful life was not guaranteed. Eric spaced out again, and the hobbit scratched his head, mildly concerned. This tall stranger really did seem a bit vacant. Black hair, odd clothes, a gentle face, definitely not from around here. The hobbit gave him another curious look and said, If you're looking for a place to stay, sir, you might try the tavern in the village. Or head east to Bree, plenty of your kind there, I hear. Ah, thank you, Grrargly. His stomach betrayed him with a loud protest. An awkward silence settled between the two. The hobbit glanced down at Eric's belly, then up again. Well, I was planning to cook up some fish and potatoes tonight. Would you care to join me? Eric wanted to politely decline, but his hunger bar blinked ominously, and he realized that starving in Middle-earth was probably not the best way to go. I'd be grateful, he said at once. The hobbit looked momentarily stunned. He clearly hadn't expected Eric to, judging from his strained expression, he probably regretted offering. Well then, follow me, but I'll have to stop by the market again. I only bought enough food for one. He turned and began to waddle down the path, muttering to himself about extra portions and unexpected tall guest. Eric, thick-skinned and increasingly hungry, followed close behind. They passed cozy hill homes and crossed a wooden bridge, heading toward the market. Hobbiton came alive around them with laughter and chatter. The market was bustling with hobbits, round-cheeked, barefoot, and cheerful. Eric towered above them like a misplaced ent sapling, having to duck often to avoid bumping into awnings or knocking over signs. He was very much a curiosity. Are you a wizard? A young hobbit asked, eyes wide as saucers. A wizard, probably thinking of Gandalf. No, not at all, just a traveler. Eric chuckled, waving it off, but the child was already being tugged away by a parent. Soon enough, his host finished buying the ingredients and waved Eric to follow him out of the crowd. Once past the hustle and bustle, Eric sighed in relief. His neck was starting to cramp from all the stooping. Finally, they stopped outside a round, wooden door built into a hillside. This is my home, sir, the hobbit said cheerfully. Mind your head, ceilings aren't made for your kind. He opened the door and walked in, then turned and added, Dinner's still a bit away, but afternoon tea is soon. Perhaps we'll have a bite then. Eric ducked and stepped inside. It was warm, tidy, and filled with the comforting scent of home. Everything was scaled smaller, of course, but the craftsmanship was charming. It all felt strangely familiar. His eyes drifted to a little chest near the door. Wait a second. I'm sorry, Eric said, turning to his host. I never asked your name. I'm Eric Starfell. The hobbit, just finishing setting down the groceries, turned and smiled. Well met, Eric. I'm Baggins. Bilbo Baggins. Chapter 2, MasterChef with a Recipe Log. Baggins. Bilbo Baggins. Eric blinked in stunned silence. No way, could it really be that much of a coincidence? Case closed, no wonder that wooden chest looked so familiar. Wasn't that his mother's old dowry chest? Hiss. Eric squinted at Bilbo. This poor, unsuspecting hobbit had no idea what sort of chaos was heading for his cozy little home. Nor could he know that his mother's chest would someday become a makeshift footstool for a sweaty dwarf. Suddenly, Eric felt the mischief bubbling up in his chest. He stepped back to the doorway, straightened his posture, and gave a formal bow. Eric, at your service. The words carried the proper tone of an official visit. Caught off guard, Bilbo blinked in surprise before hurriedly adjusting his vest and bowing in return. Bilbo Baggins, at yours and your family's. With the formalities complete, Eric stepped into the hobbit's warm and inviting home. He had to admit, hobbits might very well have a hoarding gene. His eyes were immediately drawn to a mountain of food and drink stockpiled at the back of the room. Enough provisions to host a banquet for 13 dwarves, easily. "Make yourself at home, Eric," Bilbo said warmly. "Tea is at 4, but I don't mind starting a bit early. Would you care for some sausage and bread?" Hobbit hospitality wasn't a myth. Even if Eric's visit had come with unconventional origins, Bilbo treated him with the warm welcome of an old friend. "That sounds perfect. I'll leave it to the chef's recommendation." Eric nodded graciously. "Chef's recommendation? Well, all right then." Bilbo chuckled, scratched his head, and made his way into the pantry. Moments later, he returned with a string of sausages and a heaping plate of bread rolls stacked like a carb-based fortress. Eric watched with interest as Bilbo sliced the sausages and set them beside a small iron pan. The stove was modest, clearly made for someone Bilbo's size, just tall enough to reach comfortably without standing on tiptoe. "You're interested in cooking?" Bilbo's voice floated over as Eric leaned in curiously. Taking the hint, Eric stepped aside to let the hobbit get to work. "This pan's been in my family for generations. A proper piece of cookware, if you ask me." SSSZZT. The sausages hit the hot pan with a satisfying sizzle, sending a few flecks of oil dancing into the air. There was a brief pause. Eric didn't say anything, and maybe the silence felt a little awkward because Bilbo continued, hands on his hips. "I take pride in my cooking, I'll have you know. Whether it's frying, roasting, or boiling, I learned it all from my mum." He gave the sausages a quick flip. The underside was already golden and glistening, releasing a savory, mouth-watering aroma. "GRRRGL." Eric's stomach let out a loud protest. Gulp. He swallowed his saliva. After a few more minutes, Bilbo plated a perfectly seared sausage and sprinkled a dash of pepper on top. Just as Eric opened his mouth to ask if he could sneak a bite. Ding! A translucent screen appeared before his eyes. "Function unlocked, recipe log. You have learned a new recipe, pan-fried sausage. You can now view craftable items. Your recipe log will automatically update based on materials and items you encounter." A recipe log. Clink! The plate hit the table in front of him, snapping Eric out of his trance. "You look like you haven't eaten in days," Bilbo said, pushing the dish toward him with a warm smile. "Thank you." Eric sniffled. Whether from hunger or emotion, it wasn't entirely clear. Then he devoured the sausage in record time. So fast, in fact, that Bilbo hadn't even made it back to the stove before the plate was wiped clean. Hunger +2 out of 10. "Bilbo," Eric said, licking the last of the seasoning from his lips. "Would you mind if I gave it a try? Cooking, I mean." Bilbo paused, clearly surprised by the request. "Oh, well, sure, I suppose, be my guest." He stepped aside, gesturing for Eric to take the helm. Eric leaned over the pan and grasped the handle, a bit unsure of what to do next. Just then, another floating window appeared in front of him. Cooking tutorial activated. Step 1, choose a recipe. Step 2, prepare the ingredients. Step 3, secure the utensils. Step 4, begin cooking. Normally, cooking was an art full of nuance, timing, temperature, and flavor. But for Eric, now using a system interface, it felt less like art and more like handling a futuristic forge. SSZZZ, sausages hissed and crackled in the pan. Eric stood perfectly still, barely breathing. He didn't twitch or blink, he honestly looked like he was buffering. As the edges began to brown, Bilbo opened his mouth to warn him. But Eric's arm moved with precise control. The pan tilted, flicked, and the sausage flipped gracefully through the air before landing perfectly back in place. That flip, Bilbo's eyes widened in awe. This man, he's a professional, isn't he? Maybe better keep watching. Flip, another flawless motion. The sausage glowed with a golden crust, tiny rivulets of oil shimmering over its surface. Eric added the final touch, a pinch of fine salt, scattered evenly. The heat coaxed it into a gentle melt, blending with the fat and pepper in perfect harmony. Bilbo watched, mouth watering, as Eric placed the finished sausage onto a spotless plate. Bon appetit, Eric said with a calm smile. Bilbo cut into it, and a puff of steam rose. The inside was perfect, juicy, tender, not a trace of dryness. He took a bite, boom. It was like fireworks exploding in his mouth, meat, spices, the faint crunch of seared casing, and that delicate sprinkle of salt merging into pure flavor. So hot it brought tears to his eyes. So good he didn't dare exhale. It was divine, mature, perfectly balanced. That touch of salt had lifted the dish into a higher realm of taste. Perfection. Bilbo jumped to his feet, so fast his chair toppled over. Eric, my dear sir, this is the finest sausage I've ever eaten in my life. You flatter me, Eric replied modestly, though he looked puzzled. To him, it was just system-generated food, like a pre-made meal reheated with extra steps. Still, technology was hardly a bad thing. No, Eric, I mean it, Bilbo insisted. I've eaten these sausages for years, but today, it's like tasting them for the first time. I never knew they could be this good. Oh, Eric raised an eyebrow. That sounded promising. Time to verify. Sizzle, he tossed a few more sausages onto the pan, plated them neatly, and took a bite. Then another, and another. Eric slowly set down the fork and knife, turned toward Bilbo with a faint smile, and nodded. His mouth twitched, holy hell. This is incredible. Did I really cook this? Chapter 3, To Get Rich, Start by Punching Trees. That afternoon, Bilbo bustled out of his pantry, dragging a garland of sausages behind him, dozens of varieties, declaring with heartfelt pride that, as a true local, he had to properly host such a guest. Naturally, Eric didn't refuse. Soon, the two were sharing an unexpectedly lavish afternoon tea. As Eric savored the meal, which incidentally he had cooked himself, his thoughts drifted elsewhere. He'd read The Fellowship of the Ring and its sequels countless times. He knew every major event, every iconic line, every grand narrative arc. But now that he was truly in this world, all those little gaps, the daily customs, the unmentioned routines, even dinner time, were complete mysteries. He needed time to adapt and gather information. After the meal, he politely declined Bilbo's offer of pipeweed. They settled into chairs in the garden, gazing into the distance in easy silence. For a while, the only sounds were birdsong and the soft rustle of leaves. Then Bilbo suddenly turned toward him. Eric, do you have anything important to do in the next few days? Eric arched an eyebrow, curious. Bilbo stood, took a deep breath, and waved his hands quickly. Oh, don't misunderstand. I'm not prying into your private affairs. What I mean is, if you're not in a hurry, maybe you could stay a few more days. The countryside is beautiful this time of year. You should relax, explore, take a break. You've clearly been traveling a long time. He scratched the back of his head, looking a bit shy. We hobbits rarely leave our homes, and we're not much for adventure. But me, I'm curious about the outside world. If you're willing, perhaps you could share a few stories. In return, I'll be the perfect host. Bilbo planted his hands on his hips and grinned, eyes sparkling like a child awaiting praise. To him, Eric was now a wandering master chef, perhaps even a royal cook from some distant human kingdom. Every bite of his food felt like a blessing. And truth be told, those with true skill never had to worry about going hungry. Eric saw through Bilbo's little plan immediately. Before the hobbit could speak again, nervously trying to convince him further, Eric chuckled. Ha ha ha, well, since you're being so generous, I suppose I'll have to shamelessly impose for a few more days. Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Baggins. Oh, wonderful, excellent, Bilbo cheered, nodding so fast it looked painful. When Eric finally excused himself and went back inside, Bilbo let out a long sigh of relief. It was his first time ever inviting a stranger into his home, and naturally, he felt nervous. But peace never lasts. Between afternoon tea and dinner, only a few conversations passed before twilight began to fall. Under the pretense of learning local cuisine, Eric added several new dishes to his growing recipe list. The result was simple. Bilbo devoured everything Eric made, while Eric calmly tasted Bilbo's eager but rough attempts. The poor hobbit felt slightly ashamed. It didn't feel right to serve fancy meals, while his guests chewed on burnt mushrooms and oversalted stew. To someone of Eric's skill, Bilbo thought eating such clumsy food must feel like torture. He couldn't imagine enduring something cooked by a kitchen beginner, a fish raw inside and blackened outside. He would probably faint. Still, both leaned back in their chairs after dinner, looking pleased. Say what you will about hobbits, their small bodies could hold a surprising amount of food. By Eric's standards, that meal could have fed him all day. He was sure he couldn't take another bite. After all, in Minecraft, once your hunger bar is full, you simply can't keep eating. But here, things worked differently. Once his hunger bar filled, he could still eat more, and a second, brighter bar appeared above it. A second hunger bar. A moment later, Eric understood. The apple skin mod. In game terms, it was called saturation, an invisible stat that filled after the main hunger bar, showing how long you stayed full. Most food restored hunger, but gave little saturation. That was why the hidden bar was usually empty. Here, Eric could actually see it fill after the first. Once both bars were full, he felt physically satisfied, like after a Thanksgiving dinner. Reasonable enough. After dinner, Eric waved goodbye and slipped quietly out of the cottage, heading deep into the woods. He had wanted to test something for a while. He looked around, making sure the area was empty. No houses, no eyes watching. Then he raised his hand and punched the nearest tree. Thunk. A dull sound echoed. A small crack appeared in the bark. His hand was completely fine. Thunk, 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 thunk. Each hit deepened the cracks. After a few solid punches and one sharp crack, a piece split off. The trunk groaned and fell, sending birds fluttering into the sky. From the fallen wood, a small chunk floated upward. Item acquired, oak log. Unlike the game, the wood didn't turn into a simple texture. It looked exactly like the piece he had broken. Curious, Eric punched another section, but each log took a separate inventory slot. No stacking. Each piece was slightly unique. Easy fix. New recipe unlocked, standardized oak plank. Moments later, the fallen tree disappeared, leaving neat piles of standardized oak in his inventory, along with sticks and leaves. Achievement unlocked, standardized. Aha, that explains it. Eric nodded. Just like snowflakes, raw materials couldn't stack because of tiny variations. After crafting, they became uniform items. Fresh logs could be placed in the 4-slot grid of his backpack to make stackable planks. With that knowledge, Eric moved from tree to tree, harvesting wood like a machine. As his inventory filled, new recipes appeared. First the crafting table, then the wooden pickaxe. Soon, he stood in a clearing, holding a crude tool. Without hesitation, he slammed it into the ground and began digging straight down. Later, Eric climbed out of the hole, dusty but satisfied. His backpack now held stone tools, an achievement notice, and a few furnaces. He had also made charcoal for torches. After all, unlike in the game, you couldn't just dig anywhere and expect to find coal. Eventually, a soft ding sounded, and a green light surrounded him. Level 1. No dramatic effects, no loud announcement, still it was progress. Maybe once I find diamonds and obsidian, I can make an enchanting table, he thought. By now, the sky had darkened. The stars glittered above, with a silver crescent moon nestled between them. Beautiful. Time to head back. Bilbo was probably waiting for a midnight snack. Chapter 4, Departure. Night had settled, but Eric couldn't sit still. I'll go tidy the spare room, Bilbo said. It's down the hall, you can sleep there. I'll help, Eric replied, following behind. Bilbo didn't object. As they crouched to clear some clutter, Eric finally asked what had been bothering him. By the way, what time is it now? Bilbo blinked. What do you mean? It's night, of course. Most folks are asleep by now. He lifted a small box from the floor. Eric took it and placed it outside the door. Neither stopped working. Eric frowned. No, I mean, what year is it? What time period are we in? Oh, that would be 1340, month of May. Thunk. Ow. Eric hit his head on the low wooden beam. His health bar flickered but didn't drop. The Shire calendar, 1340, he murmured. That matched year 2940 of the Third Age. Wait, when did the quest for the lonely mountain begin? He rubbed his forehead, thinking hard. It should be around April 1341, meaning the expedition would start in roughly a year. Right now, Gandalf was probably still wandering the road, and Thorin lived in exile, trying to make ends meet. Dwarves, elves, men, orcs, wargs, dragons, mountains of gold, Sauron, Dal Guldur, war, the One Ring. A storm of names and images rushed through Eric's mind like a violent whirlwind. Amid the chaos, a dark silhouette flickered at the edge of his vision. You all right, Eric? Whoosh. He blinked hard, pulling himself back to reality. Oh yeah, I'm fine, just hit my head a bit. Bilbo gave him a curious glance. You're quite tall for a human, aren't you? Eric straightened his back proudly. Of course, I'm 6'1". Thud. His health bar twitched again, and he hunched over, wincing. Bilbo burst into laughter at the sight of Eric, clutching his head in pain. Eric shook his head, laughing quietly. 1 year, he thought, what can I do in a year? Time slipped by quickly when life was peaceful. A few days later, during a calm night after a late snack, Eric sat on a small garden chair, a blade of grass between his teeth, gazing at a bright star. If an ordinary person were in this world, alone and without resources, even knowing the future wouldn't help much. Just surviving might take more than a year. But Eric wasn't an ordinary person. He wasn't worried. Creak. Eric, it's late. Aren't you heading to bed? Bilbo's voice came as he opened the door. Eric turned and smiled. Soon, I just wanted to sit here a little longer. The stars look different here. Well, don't forget to lock up when you come in, Bilbo said before heading back inside. Eric yawned and glanced at his status bar, health full, hunger overflowing. He stood, stretched, and turned toward the cozy hobbit hole he had come to know so well. A quiet life like this isn't bad, he thought. Of course, that's assuming nothing comes to ruin it. The next morning, the sky was still gray when soft rustling came from Bag End's front door. Bilbo, half asleep, groaned, tossed off his blanket, and shuffled to peek outside. Eric. Standing there, fully dressed and geared up, was Eric. You're heading out, Bilbo asked, rubbing his eyes. Eric turned and nodded. Adventure doesn't wait, Mr. Baggins. It's time I move on. He gave a polite bow. Thank you for your kindness. When we meet again, I'll repay it, I promise. Bilbo blinked, suddenly wide awake. You sure you won't stay a few more days? There's still plenty I haven't shown you. Eric smiled softly. Bilbo stopped mid-sentence. He could tell Eric's decision was already made. Partings are common, Eric said calmly, but I'm sure we'll see each other again, Mr. Baggins. I'm off to start my journey. Adventure, Bilbo thought. Something deep inside him stirred at the word, but the feeling faded quickly. He sighed and shook his head. At least wait a second, Eric. Bilbo hurried inside, rummaged through the pantry and shelves, and returned with a small bundle. Here, take this. Eric blinked. What is it? Some food, Bilbo said simply. Every proper journey needs rations, right? Eric paused for a moment, then knelt and gave Bilbo a light pat on the shoulder. Thank you, my friend. They hadn't known each other long, barely a few days, but they'd bonded quickly. Between Eric's masterful cooking and fascinating stories, a quiet friendship had formed. Promise you'll come back, Eric, Bilbo called, his voice a little shaky. Eric smiled and nodded. I will. In this land, farewells were simple. No grand gestures, just a wave before each returned to his own path. Feeling only slightly embarrassed, Eric asked Bilbo for one last favor before leaving, a map. Even though Eric knew Middle-earth's geography almost by heart, nothing beat having a real map while traveling. The Shire, the place where it all began. To the north lay the ruins of Arnor and the cold lands of Angmar. To the west stood Lindon and the Blue Mountains. To the east, past the Brandywine Bridge, was Bree. Beyond that stretched the Lone Lands, where silent rangers patrolled the growing darkness from the east. Between Brandywine and Bree, if you went south, you'd find two infamous regions. The Old Forest and the Barrow Downs, both deserted, filled with ghostly tales. Best to stay away. Anyone who's played Minecraft knows, Eric thought. You need a base first, otherwise you'll always be at a disadvantage. Only with a permanent home could he truly feel secure. After some thought, his eyes settled on a particular area, a wide stretch east of Bree. The Lone Lands. Sparse population, plenty of space, perfect for building and progress. Of course, there were other good spots. But this one had one unbeatable advantage. Both Thorin's company and the ring-bearer would pass through it. Eric wouldn't miss that kind of adventure. Having a base there would be extremely convenient. No hesitation. He rolled up the map and began his journey. From sunrise to sunset, Eric sprinted down the road, never stopping, racing east like a man possessed. A few days earlier, he had discovered something incredible. As long as he had enough food, he possessed endless stamina. He could run forever, no matter the distance. The downside, food disappeared quickly. The rations Bilbo had given him, enough to feed a normal hobbit for a full week, were half gone by the end of the first day. A week's worth of hobbit meals, consumed in just one day. Yet the speed was undeniable. In a single day, Eric passed through several Shire villages, crossed the Brandywine Bridge, and reached the borders of the Old Forest and the Barrow Downs. A true marathoner, just feed him, and he would keep running endlessly. By now, night had fully descended. Still, the sky remained far from dark. Under the starlight, Eric spotted a withered tree near the roadside, thin but dry enough. He pulled out his stone axe. Thud, 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 thud. Soon, a sharp crack echoed. The tree broke clean at the base and fell with a resounding crash. Thump! In the quiet wilderness, the sound was surprisingly loud. Eric ignored it and set to work chopping the trunk into smaller logs for firewood. Moments later, a campfire sprang to life. He opened the hefty pack of food Bilbo had given him. Curiously, the entire bundle counted as a single inventory item. If he removed any food, it would require a separate inventory slot. Eric realized that items in the same slot had to be identical stackables or recognized by the system as a single unit. He mused while skewering sausages, thinking about crafting. A shield, some armor, anything to improve his survival and combat skills. But all of them lacked one key material, iron. The fire began to wane. Eric tossed in more sticks from his inventory. Anyone passing by would probably gasp, mistaking him for a wandering wizard conjuring wood from thin air. With nothing else to do, Eric pulled out his stone sword and examined it. A line of text floated before him. Stone sword attack +5. The weapon looked handcrafted by a master artisan, smooth as jade, razor-sharp at the edges, and solid to the core. It was nearly as good as actual metalwork. A true work of art. Eric admired it, thinking he would never tire of gazing at it. Its craftsmanship could make it a collectible item. Creak! A sudden sound from the firewood snapped him out of his reverie. He remembered he was roasting sausages. When he turned, he noticed something strange. The flames had dimmed again. Burned through that fast, he thought. He couldn't let the fire die. The sausages were still uncooked. He reached into his inventory and tossed a few sticks onto the fire. Thunk! Instead of the usual crackle, the firewood hit something solid. Eric's heart skipped a beat. He froze and slowly looked up. From the shadows above the fire, a decayed head leaned out, its eye glowing red, framed by ash-colored scalp. A dry corpse stared down at him, unblinking. Eyes locked. Eric did not move. Chapter 5, Ghoul Slayer. The flickering firelight barely touched the tall, thin shadow. Eric looked up and froze. A chill surged from his feet up his spine, locking his muscles. His scalp pricked. A sense of primal dread gripped him before he processed what he saw. Ariach. It screamed. A shrill, otherworldly screech tore through the silence, so sharp it nearly stopped his heart. A twisted corpse lunged at him with terrifying speed. Eric reacted instinctively. He rolled, thud, barely dodging as the workbench behind him exploded into splinters under the ghoul's strike. Shit. Scrambling to his feet, he turned to face the attacker. Under the dim light, the creature's outline became clear. It wore tattered robes barely clinging to its emaciated frame. Its limbs were long and unnatural, like stretched shadows. Its eyes glowed faintly. Ancient trinkets jingled softly with every movement, casting eerie glimmers on its pale skin. A single word sprang to Eric's mind, horrified. Ghoul. His mouth dropped open. What the hell? I avoided tombs, skipped cursed ruins, even walked around the creepy forest. How did I still run into one of these? His voice shook in disbelief and fear. Don't come any closer. His throat moved in a dry swallow. Breath came in sharp bursts. The ghoul inched forward, savoring the tension. Then it laughed. A low, rasping sound wheezed, like broken bellows forcing air through rusted pipes. It could smell him. Fear clung to Eric like a cold sweat, rooting him in place. Every instinct screamed run, but his limbs refused to obey. The ghoul was enjoying this. The realization hit him hard. It wasn't attacking yet, it was toying with him. Something inside Eric snapped. His hand tightened around the stone sword, crafted by the system and stronger than it appeared. Fear still gripped him, but it now burned beneath a new emotion. Rage. No way. He wasn't going down like a helpless NPC. I'm a goddamn Minecraft veteran, he muttered, heart pounding. You think I'll just lie down and die? No way, I'm fighting back. The ghoul hissed. With jerky, deliberate movements, it drew a rusted, blackened blade, once used for ceremonial burials, now caked in grime and reeking of decay. The edge glimmered faintly with a sinister hue, like it had soaked in curses for centuries. It raised the sword high. Eric roared. A full-bodied, primal yell tore from his throat as he surged forward, swinging with all his strength. Clang! Metal met stone. The jolt shot through his wrist, making his arm go numb. It felt like hitting a steel wall. For a split second, he thought the sword would shatter. But it held. A glowing prompt appeared in his vision. Eric blinked, the blow had landed, it worked. The ghoul staggered back, caught off guard. It glanced down at the fresh gash in its armor, then back at Eric with confusion and rage. A simple stone sword had pierced its magical protection. What kind of stone was this? The ghoul screeched again, shriller this time and angry. Eric stood his ground. Above the creature's head, a faint glowing number hovered in the air. 57/60. His mind kicked into high gear. 60 hit points, that's 3 times mine. And it has armor too. He knew his own stats, roughly 20 HP, that was slightly above average. Hobbits had around 15 to 18, anything higher was rare. No wonder the old Arnorian kingdom had been overrun. Another glow appeared. +1. 58/60. His eyes widened. It's healing. No time to think. The ghoul's blade came down again. Eric barely deflected it, teeth gritted as the shock rattled through his bones. The ghoul was not just strong, it was relentless. Eric twisted and forced the creature's weapon aside with a grunt. Don't underestimate me, you walking corpse. He struck back with another clean hit. -4. 54/60. So he could hurt it, it wasn't invincible, it just had a massive HP pool. Then, wham! The ghoul's free hand slammed into his ribs. Black flashed. Eric flew across the floor and crashed into a pile of crates. For a moment, everything went dark. Then came the pain. His chest screamed, something cracked, maybe a rib. 13/20. 14/20. Eric gasped, coughing, but the pain was already fading. 16/20. 17, 5/20. The hunger meter ticked down, his passive regeneration kicking in. The rings on the ghoul's fingers were not just decoration. They turned the slap into something like a brass-knuckled punch. His side throbbed, but the health bar did not lie. By the time the ghoul lunged again, Eric was upright. He blocked the next strike barely and exhaled sharply. 20/20. Fully healed. But at a cost. Half his hunger bar was gone. He stood straighter, eyes narrowed. So technically, I've got 60 HP too. More if I count all the food I am carrying. Then what is there to fear? The ghoul lunged. Eric met it head-on. Neither were master swordsmen. Eric lacked formal training, and the ghoul's limbs moved in awkward, jerky motions. What followed was a brutal, clumsy fight, More like a bar brawl than a duel. Clang. Slash. Grunt. Each of Eric's swings landed, slowly chipping away. -3. -4. -5. 41/60. 36/60. 30/60. But the ghoul adapted. Its attacks came faster, wilder. Swish. Eric failed to dodge a swing. Pain exploded across his torso. -6. No problem, he could heal. Except this time, something was wrong. Another pulse of pain, sharper and deeper. -1. His status bar flickered. A red heart icon cracked. The color dimmed. Wither. No, it was worse. Cursed twos. His breath caught. Of course. Ghouls, wights, servants of darkness. Their presence corrupts everything around them. The curse gnawed at him from the inside. It was not just physical damage, it was eating at his soul. For the first time since the fight began, doubt crept in. How do you fight something stronger, tougher, and applying dot debuffs with every hit? He gritted his teeth. Think Eric. Think like a player. What beats stats? His mind snapped back to every RPG he had ever played. Movement. Terrain. Mechanics. There it was. He rolled hard, dirt flying as another strike narrowly missed. Eat dirt, you ancient fossil. He wasn't dodging gracefully. His rolls were more desperation than skill, but they bought him time. And time was all he needed. Another dodge, then he stood. His HP was ticking back up. Hunger bar dangerously low. But he had one shot left. Hey, ugly. The ghoul snarled. Taunt successful. It lunged, sword descending. Clack. A stone block appeared from thin air, slamming into place between them. The ghoul crashed into it, dazed. Eric didn't hesitate. Swing. -3. -3. 27/60. The ghoul shrieked, enraged, but Eric had already dropped another stone block, cutting off its advance. The creature howled in frustration. It tried to phase through, but could not. These were not normal stones. They were system-crafted. Suddenly, thud. A shadow dropped from above. An axe cleaved straight into the ghoul's skull. -10. Critical hit. Perfect jump attack. Eric did not miss a beat. He switched back to his sword. -4. -4. The ghoul reeled, then stabbed. Straight into Eric's chest. But Eric did not fall. He grabbed the blade, gritted his teeth, and kept swinging. Aochh. The final blow connected. The ghoul shrieked, then burst into black mist, dissipating into the air. Its eyes went dark, the body crumpled to the ground. Motionless. Achievement unlocked, Monster Hunter. Condition met, defeat a hostile creature. Special achievement unlocked, Ghoul Slayer. Condition met, defeat a ghoul. Title system unlocked. Title unlocked, Ghoul Slayer. Chapter 6, The Prancing Pony. Eric took a deep breath and casually picked up a sausage from the campfire. Perfectly grilled. A few bites later, his health bar was fully restored. Bones that had been snapped back into place fused together as if by magic. Wounds knitted shut, and his ghostly pale complexion gradually returned to a healthy pink. HP 2020. Eric instantly felt the tension melt away. Only then did he notice the newly unlocked title system. Currently, only one lonely entry appeared in the interface, Ghoul Slayer. He focused on it and noticed an option labeled Equip. Once equipped, certain perceptive individuals or unique beings can recognize your accomplishments at a glance. Your deeds also spread more quickly, undeniable proof of your achievements. So it was literally just a title. No stat bonuses, no abilities, nothing fancy. Oh well, not useless at least. Without overthinking it, Eric tapped Equip and turned his gaze to the mangled corpse of the ghoul. The wicked spirit that had clung to it was gone, leaving only a withered, twisted shell. Yet that creature had clearly been an elite monster type. Surely it must have dropped something valuable. Time for the best part, checking the loot. Wrestle. He turned the corpse over. Several shiny objects sparkled back at him beneath the moonlight. Apparently, this guy had been a rich noble once. Even in death, he still wore elaborate jewelry and burial ornaments. The wickedness has been purged, may you find peace now. Eric whispered respectfully, mostly by habit, before casually taking everything valuable and storing it. His first genuine haul since coming to this world. The jewelry appeared high quality and could sell for good money. For now, he packed it all away in his bag. Once morning came, he would lay them out under sunlight, just to be safe from lingering hexes. That was something he vaguely recalled from the source material, probably worth attempting. After finishing the looting, he focused on the old sword lying nearby. As he grabbed it, a description appeared before him. Ancient tomb sword, attack +4. That was everything, no unique traits, no special abilities, just that. Seriously, that is all. An elite mob drops a weapon with identical attack power as a stick. True, when the ghoul had wielded it, the blade definitely hit harder and included a nasty decay effect. So what occurred? Cleaned up version equals downgraded version. Eric could only assume the ghoul's strength came from an embedded hex, not the blade itself. Disappointing, but hey, it remained a genuine metal sword, better than nothing. He shrugged and added it to his backpack, might make an interesting keepsake. All things considered, it was not a terrible night. After cleaning up and extinguishing the campfire, Eric resumed traveling, guided by moonlight. If ghouls were simply wandering near the main road, this was definitely not somewhere to remain. On the other hand, perhaps he had made excessive noise chopping trees. Or maybe that brilliant, cheerful fire of his was basically a signal for any lurking terrors. Whoosh! A solitary figure rushed down the moonlit road, nimble and quick. Time passed, the moon descended, the sun rose, and warm morning light covered the land. Eric eventually slowed to a halt, jogging up a small dirt mound. At the summit, he squinted into the distance, and there it was. A town on the horizon. Even though he had never visited there, the name emerged instantly in his mind. Bree. Finally. A hint of emotion stirred in his voice. At long last, other people. But first, Eric hopped down the mound, retrieved the jewelry from his bag, and laid it beneath the sunlight. After several minutes, faint dark wisps rose from the trinkets. As the hexed energy evaporated, the dull jewels regained their shine. Hexes lifted. Satisfied, he packed them away and continued on. There is a saying, the mountain appears close, but the journey exhausts the horse. Eric did not reach the town gates until what he now considered late breakfast time. His first human encounter in this world began with a query. Who are you? A guard peered at him through a small opening in the heavy wooden gate. Just an ordinary adventurer, Eric replied smoothly. Adventurer, huh? The man examined him carefully, particularly curious about Eric's outfit, probably because it did not match local fashion. Strange clothes, but we do not turn away adventurers around here. The opening shut with a dull thud. Eric opened his mouth to speak again, but before he could say anything, the gates groaned open. Welcome, adventurer. He gave the guard a courteous nod and happened to glance at the man's status bar. HP 20 out of 20. Same as his, a proper human. By the way, Eric asked, do you know where I can locate the prancing pony? I heard it is pretty decent. Straight ahead, the guard pointed down the road. Much appreciated. The walk was not long, at least compared to the trek he had just made. Soon enough, a building with a large hanging sign came into view. Carved into the wooden placard was a stylized image of a leaping horse. The prancing pony, run for generations by the Butterbur family. The place was lively even in the late morning, with patrons milling about inside. Ignoring a few curious glances, Eric walked straight to the bar. Welcome, what can I get you? The barkeep greeted him. A place to rest, some food too. Then Eric looked down at himself. His outfit was not blending in at all. And if possible, a change of clothes. The barkeep hesitated, that was not really part of the usual service. Still, there was something about this customer, something that felt out of the ordinary. After a moment's pause, the barkeep cautiously replied, well, I could arrange something, but it depends on what you are willing to pay. That is not a standard service, you understand. Clink. Eric placed an old-looking coin on the bar. Its sharp, metallic ring turned a few heads. Will this do? The barkeep picked it up, squinting in surprise. I am not sure what this is worth, sir. Please wait, I will fetch the owner. Moments later, a middle-aged man hurried over. He gave Eric a once-over, then turned his attention to the coin. One glance and his eyes lit up. Beautiful, truly beautiful. The innkeeper whispered, It is only a silver coin, but look at that detail. This craftsmanship has not been seen in decades, sir. Are you sure you want to part with this? The coin's material was not rare, but its age, design, and historical significance gave it serious collector value. Yes, Eric nodded. Then it is a deal. The innkeeper grinned. You will have our finest room, our best food and drink, and clothes made from the highest quality fabric. I will make sure everything is perfect. He took some quick measurements and asked Eric about clothing preferences before heading out. Soon, the barkeep returned with a large tray of house specials. Roasted meats, hearty stew, fresh fruits, and a tall mug of frothy galloping horse ale. Eric took a sip. Delicious, rich barley flavor with just a touch of sweetness. He devoured everything in record time. His hunger meter jumped to maximum. One full beer later, he was pleasantly buzzed, just enough for a minor tipsy status effect. Slight dizziness, no regrets. Still under the effects of the buff, Eric made his way to the room. He shut the door and collapsed onto the impossibly soft bed. He was not physically tired. This world's rules meant food kept his energy topped up. But some things were instinctual. Lying down just felt better than standing around. Knock, knock. A gentle rapping on the door broke the silence. Eric shot upright. Who is it? Sorry to disturb, sir. It is the barkeep. I have brought your clothes. Click. Eric opened the door and took the bundle. Please try them on and let me know if anything needs altering. We can get you a replacement if needed. With a courteous nod, the barkeep left. Eric closed the door and changed. When he finally looked in the mirror, he had to admit. Not bad at all. Aside from his softer facial features and jet black hair, he looked just like a local. The picture of a proper citizen. A real worlder gone native. Chapter 7, Salvage. In a world where war is the norm, venturing out without decent gear is as good as suicide. The blacksmith's forge. A burly man hammered away with rhythmic clangs, shaping a bar of iron with practiced force. Eric stood quietly nearby, watching for a long while. Only when the hammering paused and the blacksmith took a breather did he step forward. Hello there. Good day, what brings you here, traveler? Do you sell weapons or maybe armor? The blacksmith looked up and gave Eric a sideways glance. And you are? An adventurer. So you are not from our town? Eric nodded. Then no, you can leave. The blacksmith shook his head curtly. Eric quickly added, Wait, I am willing to pay, just name your price. The blacksmith sighed, then turned back to him with a serious look. It is not about money, no amount will do. Weapons and armor made in Bree are only for Bree folk. And even then, not just anyone can buy them. He added pointedly, if you are just looking for something to keep you from getting gutted out there, I would suggest visiting the farm next door. They might sell you a hoe. Eric blinked, and then the realization struck him. Right, this was not a video game world where you could stroll into a shop. You could not just grab a full set of gear from the nearest merchant. Here, weapons and armor were strategic resources. Not the sort of thing you could casually sell to some stranger claiming to be an adventurer. Especially not to someone with an unknown background. In that case, could you sell me some iron, just a little for research? The blacksmith hesitated. How much? Eric gestured with his hands to show a small chunk. No. The blacksmith shook his head again. Eric's expression soured. If he had the right kind of metal, he could make his own equipment. But unlike in games where you could dig straight down and eventually hit a jackpot of ores, or even stumble into an underground cavern full of riches, real life was not that generous. You could not just start mining wherever you liked. Hey there, friend, I could not help overhearing, looking to buy a few things. Both Eric and the blacksmith turned to see a ragged man with tangled beard and messy hair. He stood up from behind a barrel, smiling at Eric. Clearly, he had been eavesdropping for a while. "And you are?" Eric asked. Before the man could answer, the blacksmith slammed his hammer down on the anvil. He barked, "Get lost, you junk-peddling rat, do not come sniffing around here." The man did not even flinch. Still smiling, he said cheerfully, "Easy now, my friend. I was just passing through when I heard a conversation. I might be able to help with it." The blacksmith cut him off. "Do not give me that silver-tongued nonsense. I am warning you, do not test Bree's patience." Of course, I am always respectful of local customs," the man said, still grinning. 3 seconds out of my sight, the blacksmith snapped. 3, 2. The blacksmith stood up, hefting his hammer ominously. All right, I am going." The stranger scurried back, shooting Eric a few glances as he retreated. Eric looked from the man to the blacksmith, then shrugged and followed after the stranger. The blacksmith's eyes followed him for a long time. Just before Eric disappeared down the street, the blacksmith called out, "Careful who you trust, adventurer." Eric gave a silent nod in acknowledgement. Once they reached a quieter alley, Eric asked, "What is your name?" "I am William the Scrapper, at your service." "Scrapper?" "Yeah, that is what they call us, scrappers. It is not exactly a compliment. Local merchants see us as competition, junk dealers who buy and sell everything and anything. We are everywhere and nowhere, travelers, tinkerers, bottom feeders, pick your term." "Sounds charming." William gave an exaggerated shrug. "Hey, I do not deny I deal in junk. But sometimes, hidden among the trash is exactly what someone is looking for. You think you have what I need. Oh, I know what you need: weapons, armor, something to keep the guts on the inside, yeah." Eric nodded slowly. "Follow me, good sir," William said with a confident grin, leading him into a less traveled part of town. Eric hesitated for a moment, but followed anyway. The guy's confidence seemed genuine, and besides, Bree was chaotic enough. You never knew what you might find in its backstreets. Before long, William brought him to a shadowy corner of the town, far from the busy main roads. The buildings here looked old and neglected. Vines crawled up their sides, cobwebs hung from the eaves. The whole place felt like it had been forgotten by time. Someone clearly still lived in these parts, though. One of the doors creaked open, and a scruffy man stepped out. He glanced at William, then stared at Eric for an uncomfortably long time as he walked by, only closing his door once they were well past. Click. The door locked behind. "This is your armory?" Eric asked, eyebrows raised as he looked around. William beamed proudly. "Indeed." Eric's voice went cold. "You think I am stupid or just easy to fool?" He pointed at the small yard, filled with rusted swords, dented helmets, and armor decayed beyond recognition. "This is what you wanted to show me." He was seriously debating whether attacking a merchant counted as a crime here. William quickly raised his hands defensively. "Please, good sir, I assure you, I am a respectable trader. Everywhere, Bree or beyond, weapons and armor are strictly controlled. Selling them is no joke. You get caught, you are done for. I had to pull a lot of strings to get these. And I promise you, no one else in this area has access to this kind of supply. You will not find better, or any for that matter." He pulled out a rotting longsword and held it up with all the flair of a magician. He was revealing his grand finale. "Look at this beauty, a bit rough around the edges, sure, but still useful. And if you strike someone with it, well, they will not be lasting long, rust poisoning and all that." Eric took the sword with a skeptical look. The moment he touched it, a familiar screen popped up. Decayed longsword, attack +1. He gave it a test swing, and a chunk immediately fell off the blade. If he actually tried to fight with it, odds were the sword would break before scratching anyone. A stick by the roadside would be a more reliable weapon. He glanced over the rest of the yard. Yep, everything here was junk of the same miserable quality. No wonder Bree let this place exist. What was there to regulate? Eric clicked his tongue in frustration, and casually moved to toss the sword aside. But just as he raised his arm, a system message flashed into view. New synthesis recipe unlocked. Reverse smelter new. Description: maximizes material recovery. Input: decayed longsword, estimated output: 50 to 80% raw materials. Suddenly, that piece of junk in his hand did not seem quite so worthless. Chapter 8, Locked and Loaded. He did not show it on his face, but Eric was excited. "You know," he said dryly, "I think I could grab a random stick off the road. It would be more useful than this junk." He stared at the pile of worn-out gear on the ground with visible discomfort. William scratched his head, clearly struggling to defend his so-called merchandise. After a moment, he picked up a rusted sword and swung it a few times, striking a pose. "Come on, sir, they are not entirely useless, right?" To his surprise, Eric actually raised an eyebrow. Not at William's shamelessness, but because those sword swings, while flashy, showed hints of actual technique. It was not just flailing. Eric muttered, "Not bad, you have got a bit of skill." William perked up. "Told you, you will find these useful, I promise." "You sound awfully confident." "Merchant's intuition, sir," William said with a grin that was equal parts hopeful and desperate. Eric chuckled inwardly. Interesting, this world really does have some curious characters. Like wizards, for example. Not all people with strange powers were official spellcasters. Some talents were scattered across the land, hiding in plain sight. Suddenly, William's eyes widened. A small, finely crafted trinket had appeared in Eric's hand, as if summoned from thin air. It was the smallest and most inconspicuous item from his stash of looted treasures. "I am not carrying much cash," Eric said casually. "Will this do?" William squinted at it suspiciously. That thing did not look ordinary at all. "You are offering this as payment for the gear?" he asked cautiously. "I mean, sure, it is more than enough." William took the ornament gingerly, his pupils dilating as he examined it more closely. This was not some simple bauble, it was an antique, one of the rare kinds. Nearly impossible to dig up these days. The kind of item powerful people would pay handsomely for. "Nice, it is small but valuable, definitely a profit." "Wait a minute." William stared harder at the object in his palm. The design, it was familiar, too familiar. "No way." He snapped his head up and stared at Eric, a creeping realization dawning on him. He has killed those things, he has taken this from one of them. Undead, not just any undead either, elite class. Holy hell, those things are not something regular folks can even touch, let alone rob. But Eric did not look cursed or poisoned. If anything, he seemed perfectly fine, calm even. That could only mean one thing. For him, killing an elite undead was easy. William's face stiffened. Damn it, I have run into a serious player. Eric, meanwhile, paid no attention to William's inner turmoil. He could tell from the reaction that the trinket was more than enough to buy this mountain of gear. "Pack all this up," he instructed. Bundled junk counted as a single inventory item, saved space, efficient. Still dazed, William nodded repeatedly and began tying the broken gear together with string. Some time later, Eric surveyed the tidy row of salvaged supplies in his inventory and gave a satisfied nod. William, for his part, did not question where all the junk had gone. After all, someone who could kill elite undead probably had all sorts of mysterious tricks. Seemed perfectly reasonable. With everything settled, Eric was ready to leave and find a good spot to craft. He wanted to craft a reverse smelter. The problem, it needed an iron ingot, and he did not have any irons. But no matter, he could burn some junk in a standard furnace to get it, barely. It was inefficient as hell. One iron sword melted down only yielded a single iron nugget, total scam. But the reverse smelter, now that was a game changer. It could refine 1 to 2 full ingots per piece of junk. Eric had mentally prepared himself to sacrifice half the junk for a handful of nuggets. Who would have thought that collecting garbage would unlock a reverse smelter? Now that is what I call a surprise upgrade. Just as he was about to head out, William stopped him. "Wait a second, sir." He jogged up and pulled out something wrapped in cloth from his belt. "For you." Eric took it and unwrapped it, revealing a well-crafted dagger. Iron dagger, attack +3, attack speed +50%. Special trait, sharpness +1 attack. New recipe unlocked, dagger-type weapons. Oh, Eric said, his eyes narrowing slightly. How much for it? It's free. Eric raised an eyebrow. William spoke with uncommon seriousness. I'd like it to serve as a token of friendship. You want to be friends, Eric said, somewhat amused. Yes. Eric didn't respond directly. Nice dagger, I'll take it. He had no intention of offering friendship just because of a knife. Still, the guy had helped unlock a new crafting recipe. Maybe if William ever needed a minor favor, he'd consider lending a hand. William, sensing the answer he wasn't given, didn't push. He simply smiled. A junk dealer didn't need money to stay afloat. What he needed was a sharp eye. And this man was worth noticing. Eric didn't linger in the town of Bree. After stocking up on food at the inn, he headed east. Wearing simple clothes with no obvious weapon in sight, he calmly walked out through the eastern gate. Just as he exited, several unkempt, bearded thugs emerged from an alley near the gate. They exchanged meaningful glances, no words were needed. Prime target. Just as they were about to act, a hand landed on one of their shoulders. The man turned, already knowing who it was. William, you want to cut too? No, William replied, still in the shadows. Just thought I'd warn you, don't touch him. He's not someone you want to mess with. The group fell silent. As long-surviving scumbags, they all had their own survival instincts. They dispersed quietly and went home. Junk dealers were never popular, they were too vague, too unpredictable. Leaving Bree behind, Eric found a secluded spot and set to work. He pulled out his crafting table and furnace. He patiently burned scrap until he had 9 iron nuggets, enough to craft 1 iron ingot. Then he built the reverse smelter. With it, he tossed in charcoal and more junk. The magic began. The very first piece of battered armor yielded 3 full ingots. Eric grinned, he wouldn't be running short on iron anytime soon. He quickly built 3 more reverse smelters. By the time he finished smelting every scrap of bundled junk, half a day had passed. His backpack now held 13 iron ingots. He immediately crafted a full set of iron armor, iron tools, and a wooden shield. Then he checked out the newly unlocked dagger recipe. 1 stick plus 1 ingot equals iron dagger. Same stats, +3 attack, +50% speed, but without the sharpness trait. Still, it was a solid weapon. Eventually, he'd craft an enchanting table and slap sharpness V on it. Now that would be satisfying. He also wondered, could enchantment stack with special traits? If so, that opened up a whole new field of experimentation. Once he equipped the iron gear, Eric felt a slight weight on his body. But it didn't hinder his movements in the slightest. Achievement unlocked, locked and loaded. His armor looked nothing like the blocky, clunky stuff from games. This was sleek, gleaming silver white, smooth and elegant, yet clearly built for protection. His iron sword resembled a refined longsword, thin, strong, and sharp. He slipped on the wooden shield with his left hand. Suddenly, he felt a whole lot safer. Of course, there was no need to wear it constantly. Walking around in full iron would draw too much attention. Thankfully, gear made at the crafting table could be equipped instantly when needed. Once everything was ready, he cleaned up the area, leaving no trace, and continued eastward. 1 day later, Eric had passed the last known inn on the edge of the wilderness. He now stood at the border beyond Bree. From this point on, there would be no more people, only endless wildlands. And the occasional troublemaker. All right, Eric called out. You can come out now. Silence. He sighed, annoyed. The feeling of being watched had lingered for days. He'd first noticed it while buying from William. At first, he thought it was just some local thugs curious about a stranger. But even after reaching the last inn, the sensation hadn't gone away. That's not curiosity, that's targeting. He hadn't done anything back in Bree. There were still laws, after all. Even thugs had some boundaries in civilized areas. But now he was outside the lines. Out here, there were no rules. And it was open season. SHHHH. The bushes rustled behind him. Chapter 9, Orc Slayer. If I were you, mister, I'd hand over all my money. Better broke than beheaded, yeah. SHHHing. The chilling sound of 3 or 4 knives being unsheathed echoed across the road. A gang of scruffy, masked thugs stepped out from the shadows along the roadside. Their eyes locked on Eric, wary of any sudden moves. They looked like the kind of men who hadn't bathed in days. They thought intimidation was a personal brand. All with 20 HP, no armor. That was the first thing Eric noticed, handy perk of his interface. He raised an eyebrow. You lot think I'm easy prey. A voice called from behind the trees. What gave it away? 5 more figures emerged from the foliage, flanking him. 8 in total. Eric clicked his tongue. Since when does a sleepy little town have this many lowlifes hanging around? No, this wasn't just your typical band of drunk back-alley punks. Bandits, that's what they really were. And they needed to be dealt with. Eric cracked his neck. You boys are welcome to try. Suddenly sheeing. A longsword materialized in his hand. Half the thugs jumped back on reflex, eyes wide. Scared of a party trick, their leader snarled. We've gutted worse. He pointed his blade. Get him. Clang. A clear metallic clash rang out. The bandit leader expertly parried Eric's sword with his dagger. 3 others swarmed from the sides. They thrust their blades at Eric's arms, chest, and back. If any of those landed clean, it would be game over. But the moment their daggers struck, there was a clang and a flash of silver. A full suit of shining armor snapped into place around Eric, blocking every attack. What the? The bandits stumbled back in disbelief. It was one thing to summon a sword out of nowhere. But pulling out a full set of armor mid-fight, that was just showing off. Several of them were already reconsidering their life choices. This guy's cheating. Quit gawking and kill him already, their second-in-command barked. Though he was already inching backward himself. To their credit, a few brave idiots still charged. Slash. Seeing their puny knives couldn't do much, Eric stopped holding back. He spun, stepped in, and with a single swing cleaved into the bandit leader. He followed with another stab straight through the chest. The man crumpled. Eric kicked the body off his blade, then turned to face the others. Slash, slash. He cut down another 2 without hesitation. He ignored the wild, desperate strikes that bounced off his armor. He fought like a berserker in full plate, untouchable, unrelenting. He was completely uninterested in fancy footwork. To be fair, he wasn't a seasoned swordsman. Any random thug probably had more real combat training. But none of them had magic armor, a system interface, and 0 hesitation to kill. In a fight like this, technique took a backseat to sheer guts and gear. 8 bandits, please. Compared to the undead horrors he'd faced before, these guys were target practice. At last, after another fell, one of the remaining bandits cracked. This is dark magic, he's a warlock, he's immortal, RUN. He tossed his dagger and sprinted into the forest, not even looking back. The rest followed his lead, bolting like startled rabbits. Eric chased a few down, slicing into 2 more with swift, brutal cuts. But when he glanced up, 2 of them had already vanished into the woods. He could catch them if he wanted. But meh, not worth the effort. Fight over. He rummaged through the bodies for valuables. He buried the corpses in a shallow pit, more out of habit than sentiment. He melted down the stolen weapons into raw materials. Then he continued down the road. The air reeked of blood. This stretch of path was getting real ambush-y, but strangely, he didn't see another soul for days. Not a single traveler, bandit, or even a shady squirrel. Still, signs along the road told him that while the area looked deserted, it wasn't exactly peaceful. 3 more days passed. As twilight bathed the world in gold, Eric spotted a dark silhouette on the horizon. A ruin. He squinted, flipping through his mental map. Weathertop. A name popped into his mind, matched with the image of a once-proud fortress. He broke into a jog, bounding up the slope using summoned stepping stones. He was eager to explore something, anything, besides dirt paths and trees. The ruin was, well, ruined. But even in decay, it had a kind of rugged charm. Eric wandered through crumbled halls and shattered towers, poking at old stones like a curious tourist. In one partially intact corner, he pulled out a torch and examined the ruins under flickering firelight. He was crouched over some ancient bricks when he tripped over something. He caught himself on instinct. Wait a second. It was pitch black. Eric frowned. The sun had set while he'd been busy sightseeing. And his torch, lit like a beacon atop the tallest hill in a sea of shadows. Stupid. He cursed it under his breath and snuffed the flame. The fire vanished, so did his confidence. Standing on an open peak in the dark with a torch was basically ringing a dinner bell. For every creepy thing within 5 miles. He wiped the sweat from his brow. Okay, chill, it's only been a few minutes. Probably didn't attract anything, right? F-whip. A gust of wind tore past his cheek. Eric turned sharply, just in time to see something slump behind a broken wall. An orc, ugly, big, definitely dead. With an arrow sticking out of its skull. Cold sweat dripped down his back. That arrow, if it had been aimed at him. That could have easily taken half his HP, or his whole head. Lucky for him, the orc had been the one in the wrong place. And unlucky for him, it hadn't come alone. From the shadows, more orcs began pouring out. Ugly, snarling, shouting threats like goblins on meth. Haha, dinner just walked in. Fresh meat. Rip off the armor and boil it. I call dibs on his skull. I need a new wine cup. Eric blinked. Wow, charming. There were around a dozen of them, maybe more. Individually, not impressive. About 16-17 HP each, ragged armor, and all around filthy. Definitely not an elite force, more like a homeless orc militia. But that didn't mean they weren't dangerous in a mob. Still, Eric had fought worse, undead bandits. He wasn't some clueless newbie anymore. Once the initial shock wore off, he sized them up and saw an opportunity. Time to strike first. He charged with his blade, slicing down 2 orcs in one motion. Blood hit the ground, and the rest went feral. They swarmed. A couple tried to flank him, going for a sneak stab while he was focused on the front. Eric didn't even turn to block. Thwip thwip. 2 arrows flew from the dark, each hitting a would-be backstabber right between the eyes. Come out and fight, you cowardly rat, one orc screamed into the night. Another arrow answered for him. Thunk. Down he went. By now, Eric was nearly done with the rest. Low HP, no armor, these orcs were little more than XP snacks. A few more swings, a couple stabs, and the hilltop was littered with bodies. He hadn't even lost much stamina. And the mysterious archer in the shadows, definitely helpful. Achievement unlocked / title earned, Orc Slayer. Nice, Eric muttered, flicking blood from his blade and sheathing it. He raised his hand in a non-threatening gesture. He looked toward where the arrows had come from. Total darkness. Thanks, I guess. Chapter 10, Development. Excuse me, but who are you? Eric asked warily. Just a wanderer, the voice replied. A figure slowly emerged from the shadows. The voice was clear, yet there were no footsteps, not even a whisper of movement. Had he not shown himself, Eric likely would have never noticed someone lurking nearby. Suppressing the urge to pull out a torch, Eric squinted in the moonlight. The man was tall, draped in a hooded cloak. A dagger hung at his waist, and a simple wooden bow was slung across his back. His face was hidden in darkness, the hood casting deep shadows. Not a single feature was visible. Thanks, Eric said eventually. Sure, he could have handled the orcs on his own. But the guy had helped, and that counted for something. No need to thank me, the wanderer replied. He began retrieving his arrows and looting the corpses of the orcs he'd taken down. They were my prey anyway, been tracking them for a while. You just made my job easier. He glanced at Eric again and added something. That said, lighting a fire in the open at night, especially this high up, is usually a bad idea. Eric scratched the back of his neck sheepishly. Fair point. He decided to change the subject. You're one of the Dunedanes, aren't you? The wanderer looked a little surprised. Yeah. While they spoke, he had already picked over the bodies he'd killed. The ones Eric had slain remained untouched. I'd heard stories, Eric said, that there are some Dunedains secretly protecting these wildlands. I guess they were true. People actually say that, the wanderer chuckled. That's rare. Dunedains, descendants of a northern people long since scattered, had a reputation. They were known for being elusive and enigmatic. Many folks, not knowing any better, lumped them in with bandits and drifters. Have you fought the things from the old barrows? The wanderer asked suddenly. Eric tensed slightly. The man's gray eyes were sharp, gleaming in the dark as they fixed on him. I have, Eric admitted. How did you know? Instinct, the wanderer said simply. Spent a lot of time dealing with those things myself. Well, okay, mysterious Dunedain instincts, sure, why not? After a moment's thought, Eric pulled out the corroded, rune-etched sword. He'd looted it from a barrow wight and tossed it to the wanderer. The man caught it in one hand and examined it. After a few seconds, his eyes widened slightly. You recognize it? He nodded. Very much so, this used to be standard issue, centuries ago. The forging method's been lost, but this one might still be usable with some restoration. Then it's yours, Eric said. Are you serious? The wanderer asked, clearly surprised. You do realize this is an antique. A collector would pay a fortune. Maybe, Eric shrugged. But it seems more useful in your hands than gathering dust in someone's hoard. Besides, I get the feeling it means something to you. The wanderer stared at him for a moment, then gave a deep nod. Thank you, truly. He fished around in his pouch for a second. Then he pulled out a small coin and handed it to Eric. Keep this if you ever need me. Go to the Forsaken Inn and wait. It's my usual stop. I'll be there within half a month. Eric pocketed the coin. Eric Starfell and you. Faradin. And with that name, the wanderer slipped back into the night. Eric stood for a moment, gazing out across the wildlands. You know what? This place isn't half bad. About 2 weeks later, Eric emerged from a twisting series of underground tunnels. He was grinning like a man who just struck gold. Literally. His inventory was full with raw iron ore, unprocessed stone, and several veins of promising minerals. Persistence pays off. After days of digging and exploration, Eric had finally discovered a proper iron vein deep underground. He had no idea how large it was, but it was definitely enough to start mining properly. And iron wasn't the only thing down there. While digging tunnels outward, he'd occasionally hit pockets of other materials. Copper, sulfur, saltpeter. Now, Eric wouldn't have recognized these things on sight. But thankfully, his handy little system identified everything he picked up. It came with a glowing item ID tag, very thoughtful. And once his inventory included both sulfur and saltpeter, plus charcoal, the crafting menu suddenly lit up. Gunpowder and even better TNT. From that moment, his mining sessions had taken a much more explosive turn. And now that he'd confirmed this area had abundant minerals, Eric made his decision. This was the spot, the first base. He opened the map and marked a point between Weathertop and the Goblin Forest. It was a good distance from the main road. The area had everything: trees, a freshwater lake, flat land, and best of all, space. If it weren't for the occasional orc raiders and warg packs, this place would be downright idyllic. But Eric wasn't too worried about that. 1 month later, a stone and wood fortress stood proudly on the plain. A 7-meter-high wall encircled a vast patch of land. It towered above the grass like a castle dropped from the sky. Inside, a spring-fed stream now flowed, feeding a field of wheat. The wheat had seemingly sprouted overnight and already ripened to gold. From a distance, the place looked peaceful, serene, uninhabited, even. But wisps of smoke curling from inside the walls told otherwise. Watchers in the shadows saw the smoke, and they knew someone lived there. That evening, Eric returned from a routine mining trip. His pickaxe was slung over one shoulder, his inventory full of stone and ore. As he reached the gate, a sudden feeling made him look up. Someone was sitting on the wall, watching him. A familiar silhouette. Faradin, he called. The figure waved in reply. Farad'n leapt down from the wall with practiced ease, landing gracefully without a sound. Eric couldn't help but mutter a low whistle. Damn, that's some top-tier agility. How'd you find this place? I heard from my people, Farad'n said. They spoke of a strange wizard who conjured a fortress out of thin air and planted a wheat field that grew like weeds. The moment they described you, I knew. He looked around. Besides, this place kind of sticks out. You're burning fires daily, hard to miss.